Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. This week's video is on a topic that I haven't really covered on this channel before. However, when I mentioned possibly discussing it, I got some very positive feedback, so I figured why not? And like I said, I wanted to start to discuss film and sort of flex my writer muscles a little bit more, so I figured this was the perfect way to do it. The subject of this week's video is the 2025 Superman film, and why I believe that it is the best way to take a character and bring it into a new era. The movie is a great example of this, taking a character that is classic and bringing it into the modern age of filmmaking as well as superhero movies in general. But to fully understand why I believe that, I think we should take a look back at some previous iterations of the Man of Steel and talk about why they succeeded, why they didn't, and what it all means for Superman 2025. So, without further ado, let's discuss why Superman 2025 is the perfect next step. But you can't talk about Superman or superhero movies in general without discussing Superman from 1978, starring Christopher Reeves and directed by Richard Donner. Superman 1978 is also the perfect way to bring a character into the next generation, to move a character forward with the times. Which is funny to say because it was so long ago, but before 78, Superman was seen more as a comic strip. There wasn't exactly a set lore, things would change often, he'd get new powers, and also the overall tone, it wasn't taken that seriously. The other live-action adaptations of Superman to that point were TV series that, once again, were not taken that seriously. But Superman did something different. It brought in real filmmakers and real actors. They brought in names like Marlon Brando and Gene Hackman to play supporting roles in this movie. And not to mention, a lot of the filmmaking techniques used, the camera work, the lighting, the sets, were all very, very impressive for the time, and still impressive to this day. By bringing in all of these legitimate movie stars and filmmakers, it made the character of Superman feel more real and fit into a much more grounded world, the world of the 1970s. A very grimy and smoky kind of world. Combine that with some of the story changes that they made to Superman, like introducing the idea that his iconic S is the symbol of the House of L, or that Clark Kent is a reporter. Things like that added so much to the character and helped bring them into the new age. And it still kept the core of those much more silly comics, and it had comedy, but it also had stakes and drama and acting, like big acting kind of thing. So all that to say, while I will be referencing Superman 1978 as the sort of beginning point, it too is a step forward and an adaptation of something else in the past, and it honors that source material while bringing in new information and new and interesting angles. So if that's our basis, then let's start to talk about the other leaps and other attempts that were made, such as Superman Returns from 2006. Superman Returns is directed by Bryan Singer and stars Brandon Routh as Superman and Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor. The interesting thing about this movie is that it is a direct sequel to Superman 2 from the 70s. It ignores Superman 3 and 4. With the exception of some TV shows, this is the real first attempt to bring Superman to the modern age. Well, the modern age of 2006, that is. So when you watch Superman Returns, you are meant to believe that this Superman is Christopher Reeves' Superman, and all of the things that we saw in Superman 1 and 2 also happened in this universe. But that's where the trouble begins. The trouble begins because of that connection to the 70s. The movie winds up feeling very, very split in what it wants to be. It's overall a fairly moody and dramatic movie. However, this sort of dark and moody atmosphere clashes heavily when it attempts to have the same sort of silliness that the 1970s movies had, and that sort of earnestness that they had. There's no better place in the film that shows this problem than the Daily Planet and Metropolis itself. In Superman 1978, the Daily Planet is a grimy office. It's a crowded, loud newsroom with smoke in the air. You've got Perry running around with his cigar, barking at people, telling them what to do. It's a very grimy environment. And that's intentional. The same applies to Metropolis itself. But that's fully intentional, because here comes this square, Clark Kent, bumbling around his office, being nice, asking for half of his check to be sent to his mom, and overall being a source of light within this grimy office. The same applies to Superman flying around Metropolis, saving cats out of trees, stopping burglars. He sticks out from the grimy, realistic city as a symbol of hope. But in Superman Returns, the Daily Planet is kind of your average newsroom from the modern day. It's not loud, it's not chaotic, it's not crowded or smoky. It has high ceilings, it's a very sterile office environment. The other jarring thing is that Superman Returns doesn't take place in 1979 or 1980. It takes place in 2006. So on top of the environments feeling different and being shot differently, we also have modern technology like laptops, flat screens, and modern cell phones littering all of the scenes, and it just kind of feels weird. Yet we're supposed to believe that this is the same office when Perry comes around the corner barking orders and yelling. It just doesn't really fit with what it is supposed to be. It's definitely not wrong to say that that's what a modern newsroom would look like, but it's not what it is supposed to be or what it's trying to be. You see how it's split. The same feeling applies to the plot lines. One minute we're watching a very melodramatic scene where Superman is depressed that Lois has moved on from him and she has a kid now, but then he finds out that it's his kid, and all this melodrama. It really, really clashes with. We then cut to Lex Luthor's comic book evil plan of creating a continent out of kryptonite in the middle of the ocean to sell real estate. Which, there's nothing wrong with either of those things if they were in different movies. Lex Luthor wanting to create a continent out of kryptonite sounds right at home in the comics, as well as the 78 Superman continuity. It clashes with these very overdramatic sequences that I also mentioned, and you can see how cutting between these two things you kind of get a little bit of whiplash. This feeling applies to the film as a whole, and the whole thing feels very, very lost. Not to say that it's horrible. I think Brandon Routh is a great Superman, and I would have loved to have seen him get another chance to don the cape. Even Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor does an amazing job, and there are exciting sequences, such as Superman saving the plane at the beginning of the movie, and the whole climactic sequence on the Kryptonite continent. But even with those positive things, it's easy to see why this iteration of the Man of Steel didn't really work out. It wanted to take a step forward while also having one foot in the past. It didn't know what was necessary to bring, so it said, let's just do it again, but I want to change this. It was too stuck in the past. But speaking of the Man of Steel, The Man of Steel came out in 2013 and was directed by Zack Snyder and stars Henry Cavill and Russell Crowe. The Man of Steel dives headfirst into a whole new take on Superman. This isn't a legacy sequel, this isn't a half continuation of a previous movie. This is a new continuity with a new character, a whole new origin story. It's serious, it's dark, it has comparisons to religion and metaphorical questions and moral dilemmas and an epic final battle, and it sounds epic and awesome and it looks really good. But that's really not the whole story with this movie. The biggest praise I can give to The Man of Steel is that it has a very clear vision and a very clear goal. Unlike Superman Returns, it has a set vision. It knows exactly what it wants to be. It's so clear to me that Zack Snyder had a hand in every aspect of this film and had a consistent tone throughout the movie. And I have to give them that. It also looks really good. The shots are very intentional. Zack Snyder knows exactly what he wants you to feel in these moments. The way the flight scenes are shot are not up close and personal, but rather as if you were on the ground watching in awe of this super-powered, godlike being flying at the speed of sound overhead. The sharp use of lighting, it's all very well planned out and very, very cohesive. However, as a movie that is supposed to represent Superman, I would say it stumbles. And the reason why is the exact opposite reason that Superman Returns failed. Rather than being too stuck in the past, it didn't carry enough of the past forward with it. It didn't take the core aspects of Superman and bring them with it into the future, into this new direction. The identity of Superman is that he is a symbol of hope. That he wants to help no matter what and always do the right thing. And while he may waver and he may question himself, at the end of the day, he still does what is right. And I think if you asked anybody who Superman is or what he represents, that's what they would tell you. However, we don't really see much of that in this movie. When we have Pa Kent telling Clark that maybe he should have just let those kids die and he should hide himself and not help people, it just feels jarring. Clark's whole journey of learning that he should help people and that he has a higher purpose and that he shouldn't be afraid to go put himself out there, unlike what Pa Kent says, is very interesting on paper, but knowing the character, knowing the things that make Superman Superman, it just doesn't feel like Superman. Because I remember at first when I watched it, I thought that by the end of the movie, he would become this sort of symbol of hope and want to help people and things like that. But that never fully happened. Yes, he wants to defend Earth and recognizes as his new home, but it also doesn't feel like he becomes Superman by the end of it. Especially when we see him level a city in a fight, which in his defense, he was fighting somebody who was trying to destroy the city, and he hadn't really fought anyone before, especially on his level. So, I understand the lore reason why, there was so much destruction, but it's just jarring to see him crashing through buildings and stuff exploding, and he's not trying to help anybody. He's just focused on the fight. He also causes the extinction of Kryptonians by blowing up the ship, and even says something really dark about it when it happens. He's like, Krypton had its chance, blah, 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 blah. Whereas I feel like Superman would have been like, let's try and move you somewhere else. This is their home. You can't just take it. I feel like that's a more Superman reaction to say that, and then if Zod would continue, then of course he'd have to destroy it. But instead, we don't get that moment of optimism or that moment of wanting to help and wanting everyone to be okay. We just get him saying a cool line and then blowing something up. And then finally, the most controversial thing from this movie, which is him killing Zod, which is jarring, but I don't mind it as much as others do. I know a lot of people feel like he doesn't show any remorse, but I feel like his reaction initially afterwards is meant to show that. So it is weird, but in Superman 2, he kills Zod. He just throws him into a pit, unless it's the made-for-TV version, in which case Zod gets arrested. But really, this is not a bad movie by any means. It's a good movie with a clear vision. It's just not a good Superman movie. I truly believe that if this movie didn't have Superman's name on it, he wasn't wearing an S, he wasn't from Krypton, it was just a different, generic kind of superhero, this film would have gone down very similarly to Brightburn. A very interesting idea that I can really get behind. I feel like it would get a lot more praise if it just didn't have the Superman name attached to it. But instead, it trudges too far into a new direction without respecting the past, which is why it ultimately failed at being the next step for the Man of Steel. But that all leads us to Superman 2025, directed by James Gunn and starring David Cornsweet. I believe that Superman 2025 is the perfect blend. The perfect blend of holding on to the past but trudging forward in a new direction. It's not just a shot-for-shot copy of the 1970s Superman. It doesn't use the same kind of comedy that they did. And it also tries new things. I think first and foremost, it nails the character of Superman. He wants to help, he wants to do the right thing. And one of the biggest criticisms about Superman that I've heard from people who aren't fans of him is that he's flat, he's invincible, so he has no problems, he always saves the day. And that's not really true either in the comics, and especially not in this movie, because the thing that makes Superman interesting and makes him vulnerable is the fact that he's human at the end of the day. He doubts himself, he struggles internally, something that's touched on in Man of Steel, but feels really earned here. This Superman, despite being in year 3 of the job, still doesn't feel like, you know, Superman, you know, who can do everything. He still feels very new to this role. And so the movie uses that very interestingly when they have him doubt himself, and he ends up really earning that title by saving people, by doing the right thing, by learning that at the end of the day, his actions and what he does is the most important thing. And that lesson is obviously taught to him from his father, Pa Kent, who is still around in this universe. And once he leaves his home and returns to Metropolis and saves a bunch of people from a falling building, that is the first time that we hear the full Superman theme all the way through. Throughout the entire movie, it's just the first few notes of it. That is the first time we hear it almost all the way through. Because he has learned his lesson. He's come full circle. He's now sure of himself as Superman. And it feels really, really earned. It takes the complex character that we wanted to see in the darker parts of Superman Returns and the Man of Steel and meshes it with the core vision of Superman being a symbol of hope for everyone. The overall tone of the movie also does a great job of blending the new with the old. It's able to have the sort of high-stakes drama with the campiness of the older movies. A great example would be Lex Luthor. I understand him, and I'm afraid of him in terms of the movie. When I see him, I know something's wrong. But he also still has his, goons. Like, he still has his sidekicks, including the return of Otis, who, if you remember from Superman 1978, is the one who's all like, "Hey, Mr. Luthor," and he's like, you know, he's that one. He's the one who brings him the paper, and then I'm nerding out about it, but I noticed upon rewatch of Superman that Otis technically is in the new movie, which, you know, I'm always happy to see little things like that. But it's not an exact copy. His sidekicks aren't a group of bumbling idiots. They are legitimate threats, while still being funny. It strikes a perfect balance between menace and silliness. Whereas Lex Luthor in the 2006 movie is just an exact copy of Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, down to his sidekicks and his evil plans. Not that it's bad, but it's not an evolution like this one is. The other thing about Lex Luthor is that in the 70s version, he was the 70s idea of a billionaire. What somebody from the 70s would imagine a super rich evil villain would be. And that's why he didn't really hit home in Superman 2006, because times have changed and our ideas of what rich people and evil rich corporations look like have changed. And I would say Superman 2025's Lex Luthor is a great modern version. He carries himself, sounds, and acts like a modern billionaire, because he's more related to tech rather than real estate. Small things like that that evolve the character and take him into the future while also keeping the core of, I hate Superman and I want to make money. I also think something else Superman 2025 does is play with our expectations a little bit. There's several moments where you think Superman is going to do something that he would typically always do, and then he fails. For example, when they are fighting in the baseball diamond, he tries to talk to the engineer and, you know, say the classic, "You don't have to do this. You don't have to fight for Lex, blah, blah, blah." And instead of actually trying to convince them fully, he just gets completely clotheslined by Ultraman. Also, the drama with him and Lois Lane works really well and feels realistic, while also keeping the sort of characterization of Lois being a feisty reporter and Clark being sort of a shy nerd. All that to say, I think I've illustrated why I believe that Superman 2025 is the best Superman film we've gotten since 1978, truly. Unless you count the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2, but that didn't theatrically release. That's a whole other can of worms. It does a perfect job at blending the past with the future. It blends fun with seriousness. It blends the moral lessons with the lightheartedness, and I think it's amazing because of that. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you who watch my videos that are a little unrelated to what I normally do. It's been a bit of a slow news day in the Life is Strange / gaming department, other than some drama stuff, but I don't really cover that, so I've been focusing a little more on movies this summer. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I appreciate every single one of you, and I hope you have a good morning or evening or, you know, whatever. Dun, 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 dun.